There are currently more than 5.6 billion people who use phones globally as of October 2023, surpassing 2/3 of the global population. They connect us, inform us, and even save lives. Given their prevalence in widespread ownership, as well as regularity of use, they may very well be one of the technologies we take for granted most. But their humble beginnings stemmed from an inventor working on a different project altogether. And although Alexander Graham Bell had dedicated his life to achieving a massive technological leap in communication, he would soon find himself going so much further. This is the story of Alexander Graham Bell, and this is Learn Something New. Alexander Graham Bell was born in Edinburgh, Scotland on March 3, 1847 as Alexander Bell, with his middle name not being added until he was 10 years old. But his road to becoming the inventor of the telephone would seemingly be destined from his lineage. Bell's father was a professor of speech elocution at the University of Edinburgh, and his mother, despite being deaf, was an accomplished pianist. His paternal grandfather was also a renowned expert on the mechanics of human speech. Needless to say, communication was in his blood. The young Alexander was an intellectually curious child who studied piano and began attempting to invent things from a very early age. And although he was really close with his family, it began to shrink all too soon, with both of his brothers passing away from tuberculosis by the time Bell was in his early 20s. Initially, Bell's education consisted of homeschooling. Bell didn't excel academically, but was wildly curious about the world around him. And although he wasn't the best student, he was an innovative problem solver even early on. When he was just 12, Alexander was spending time with a friend at a grain mill. While there, he noticed the slow process the workers had to go through in order to husk the wheat grain. After he got home, he invented a device with rotating paddles and nail brushes that could quickly remove the husks from the grain, easing the workload on the farmer and making the whole process more efficient. At age 16, Bell began studying the mechanics of speech as part of his training to one day take over the family business. He went on to attend Royal High School and the University of Edinburgh. In 1870, Bell, along with his family, moved to Canada, and the following year he settled in the United States. While settling in the US, Bell implemented a system his father developed to teach deaf children called visible speech, using a set of symbols that represented speech sounds. In 1872, he opened the School of Vocal Physiology and Mechanics of Speech in Boston, where deaf people were taught to speak. And by age 26, the budding inventor became professor of vocal physiology and elocution at Boston University's School of Oratory, even though he didn't have a college degree. It was while teaching there that Bell met Mabel Hubbard, one of the deaf students, and they fell in love, marrying on July 11, 1877. They went on to have 4 children, though their 2 sons died as infants. But throughout all this time, he never lost his passion for emerging technologies and inventing. Before then, in 1871, he had started working on a device known as the multiple telegraph or harmonic telegraph, essentially a telegraph transmission of simultaneous messages set to different frequencies. He even managed to find financial backing for this through local investors in Boston, including Thomas Sanders and Gardner Hubbard, the father of his soon-to-be bride. Between 1873 and 1874, Bell spent long days and nights trying to perfect the harmonic telegraph. But during his experiments, he became interested in another idea: transmitting the human voice over wires. But Bell's diversion frustrated his benefactors, and Thomas Watson, a skilled electrician, was hired to be his assistant to refocus Bell toward the harmonic telegraph. But Watson soon became enthralled with Bell's idea of voice transmission, and the two created a great partnership, with Bell being the idea man and Watson having the expertise to help bring Bell's ideas to reality. Through 1874 and 1875, Bell and Watson labored on both the harmonic telegraph and a voice transmitting device. By June of 1875, they had proven that different tones would vary the strength of an electric current through a wire. To achieve success, they only needed to build a working transmitter with a membrane capable of varying electronic currents and a receiver that would reproduce these variations in audible frequencies. And on June 2, 1875, while experimenting with his harmonic telegraph, Bell and Watson discovered that sound could be transmitted over a wire. It was a completely accidental discovery. Watson was trying to loosen a reed that had been wound around a transmitter when he plucked it by accident. The vibration produced by Watson's act traveled along the wire into the second device in the other room where Bell was working. The twang that Bell had heard was all the inspiration that he and Watson needed to accelerate their work. And on March 7, 1876, the US Patent Office issued Bell the patent numbered 174,465, covering the method of an apparatus for transmitting vocal or other sounds telegraphically by causing electrical undulations similar in form to the vibrations of the air accompanying the said vocal or other sound. On March 10, 1876, 3 days after he had been granted this patent, Bell famously succeeded in getting his telephone to work. Bell recounted the historic moment in his journal, writing, "I then shouted into the mouthpiece the following sentence: 'Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you.' To my delight, he came and declared that he had heard and understood what I said." This was the very first phone call, and Bell immediately wanted to show the world what he was capable of. After seeing the device in action at the 1876 Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia, then Emperor of Brazil, Dom Pedro II, exclaimed, "My God, it talks." Several other demonstrations followed, each successful at a greater distance than the last. On July 9, 1877, the Bell Telephone Company was organized, with Emperor Dom Pedro II being the first person to buy shares in it. He also had one of the very first telephones installed at a private residence, that being in his palace in Brazil. On January 25, 1915, Bell successfully made the first transcontinental telephone call. In New York City, Bell spoke into the telephone's mouthpiece, repeating his famous request, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want you." From San Francisco, California, 3,400 miles, 5,500 kilometers away, Mr. Watson replied, "It will take me 5 days to get there now." From here, his name spread globally, as did the use of his device. By 1877, he helped found the Bell Telephone Company, which today now goes by the name AT&T. But despite his success, after the telephone started to get used by the public, he found himself facing constant legal troubles. Scientists like Antonio Meucci and Elisha Gray, who were working on similar technologies at the time, claimed that they had actually created the telephone prior to Bell even filing his patent. This would continue to be a thorn in Bell's side for the next 18 years, as his company faced over 550 court challenges to his patent, with a few of them going all the way to the Supreme Court, but none were successful in removing the patent rights from the Bell Telephone Company. Despite Alexander Graham Bell being known almost exclusively for his major contributions to the way we communicate with one another, he didn't just stop after the success of the first telephone. He would continue to invent and innovate for the remainder of his life, whether it was a metal detector, the initial prototype of the device that would go on to become the iron lung that helped facilitate breathing, and even working on early prototypes of planes around the same time as the Wright brothers. He went beyond just inventing, however, continuing to work with the deaf, establishing the American Association to promote the teaching of speech to the deaf in 1890. He also served as the president of the National Geographic Society and helped build it up to the publishing behemoth it is today. Not stopping there, he was also one of the founders of Science magazine. He tried his best to accomplish everything he could within his lifetime, but eventually it would come to an end, and he passed away on August 2nd, 1922. Upon word of his death, the Canadian Prime Minister called Bell's wife, Mabel, saying, "My colleagues in the government join with me in expressing to you our sense of the world's loss in the death of your distinguished husband. It will ever be a source of pride to our country that the great innovation with which his name is immortally associated is a part of its history. On behalf of the citizens of Canada, may I extend to you an expression of our combined gratitude and sympathy." And as his funeral ended, every single one of the 14 million telephones in the United States were silenced for a minute to respect his work. It's incredible to see that a piece of technology that has become so universally ingrained in our society to the point where taking it for granted is to be expected was praised so enthusiastically, immediately being recognized as one of the greatest inventions of humanity. And so too was Alexander Graham Bell's mindset also taken for granted. As he told a reporter months before his death, "There cannot be mental atrophy in any person who continues to observe, to remember what he observes, and to seek answers for his unceasing hows and whys about things." Thank you for watching Learn Something New. Like, subscribe, and share for more. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next one.